Okay, so look at Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice at 21:9. This game probably will have flown under the radar for a lot of people, and it nearly did for myself, but thank God it didn't, because this is one brilliant release. Your character, Senua, is a Celtic warrior, i.e. this is set in Viking times. However, she has psychosis. She is fighting both a battle in the physical world and the one in her head. But before I go on, let's cover the ultra-wide support. So the beautiful fact is, this game has near perfect 21:9 support. The gameplay correctly shows off more on the sides of the screen at all moments, and this is especially appreciated as the game has the camera hug very tightly to Senua's body, so she takes up a lot of screen space. Having the extra view on the sides of the screen makes for a more open, pleasurable experience. You keep the feeling of being right up next to her, but you also gain better visibility of the world that you're exploring. There is no HUD to speak of, apart from the occasional saving icon in the bottom right hand side of the screen. Screen effects like when damaged or having your vision altered in any of the myriad of ways it is during your playtime always use the entire screen space correctly, stretching to do so, however the stretch isn't noticeable. In-game cutscenes use the entire screen space beautifully. You don't notice the transition from gameplay to a cutscene other than from the fact that you lose control of her movement. Pre-rendered cutscenes seem to both stretch to fill the screen and also to stick to their original positions, depending on the moment at hand. Regardless though, they never appear to be distorted and so work very nicely from my experience. The last cutscene moment that seems to be in-game is when she's looking into the mirror. Around the edges you get a very rough outline of what I suppose is the mirror edge, but clearly only those above 16:9 will ever see this, and outside this edge is a static image. It kind of works, but only just about acceptably, and I suppose it's simply done so that it supports wider aspect ratio screens. The main menu is sadly the one thing that drags the game down 21:9 wise. It locks itself to 16:9 with black bars, but honestly it is at least neat, and it doesn't break in any terrible way from the extra screen space, and you're not here for long. The in-game menus thankfully are completely different and scale to use the entire screen space beautifully. Finally, loading screens are just black screens and they're very short, and so nothing can go wrong with that. Performance-wise, it's very good. So yes, it's not terribly easy to run. On a GTX 1080 Ti at 3440 by 1440, I would fluctuate about the 60s, sometimes to the low 70s, and sometimes into the high 50s, but 95% of the time generally holding about the 60s on highest everything settings. I should note though that the massive fire destruction moments in this cause the FPS to dive to the 30s and 40s temporarily as you run through them, but FPS recovers once you leave those brief moments. The game is pretty well optimized, however, and you should be okay getting it running. That said, it is demanding, and whilst there are an okay number of graphics settings to play with, they are kind of broad. You don't have the normal anti-aliasing setting, or ambient occlusion setting, etc. The main issue, however, with the performance is the stuttering. Every so often the game, whilst still comfortably over 60, will stutter for a second. I can't seem to remove this stutter by dropping graphic settings, and that is rather clear in the fact that the FPS is comfortably high even during a stutter, which makes me believe it's a loading issue or just optimization issue. I'm on an SSD which should remove the bottleneck, so it's a little strange. Thankfully these stutters aren't very common and they are very brief, but they are there regardless and it's annoying to run into. Here's hoping a future patch will iron them out. On some other technical points, you can remap all your keyboard and controller inputs, which is lovely. Graphics setting changes don't need a game restart, something I adore. And finally, wearing a pair of headphones, like the game advises, is a very good idea. Because of the psychological nature of the game, the idea is that you have voices in your head the whole time. Headphones really make it feel like those voices are in your head instead of coming from a single speaker a little bit in front of you. So what's this game actually about? So like I said, the game is set in the age of Vikings, and you play as a badass Celtic woman who is on a journey into the Norse underworld of Helheim to retrieve her lover's slain soul. She is driven by deep loss, and what is most interesting about this game is the thickly woven theme of psychological torment, how she has dealt with her mental issues in the past, been treated by others in the past, and how she is affected right as you play. The game manages to convey this continual fight inside her head, a constant stream of voices, directions, opinions, observations, and so forth, all the whilst she stays relatively silent. It's a fantastically crafted piece that deals with a very difficult subject and manages to immerse players who have never, and likely never will, come close to experiencing what this kind of problem is like in reality. When I stop playing after a long stretch, everything suddenly feels very quiet. You get so used to having those voices calling out all the time. So without spoiling the story, it's great fun. Very confusing for a long time and very weird and random, but there are stones around that you can interact with and they explain various elements of mythology, etc. about the game world, and between that and the main story you piece things together. It's no ordinary story, that's for sure, but one that will totally hook you. As for gameplay, it is very clearly broken down into two other parts beyond the story: puzzle solving and fighting. There are a variety of puzzles that you need to complete in different areas, nothing overly taxing and you should be able to solve them rather quickly, but they are fun nonetheless. I just hope that they don't get too tiresome after a long time if they remain the same. After the first 4 hours of playing, things have stayed varied, but there has been a lot of reuse of certain puzzles, like matching the symbols to real-world objects. And as for the fighting, this is very well built. I must admit the first fight caught me off guard after the very heavy story and atmosphere lead up to that point, and after finishing that fight, I felt like it was tacked on. I felt the fighting was just there to flesh out the game and wasn't needed, but thankfully I can say this goes away shortly after. It becomes far more integrated into the experience, and you seamlessly enter and exit these engagements. It never felt pointless afterwards, though more variation in enemy types would have been welcome. That said, you do have your usual grunts to fight, and you do have big bosses to fight. It's nothing like Dark Souls level of difficulty, but they're still challenging. Now, this is certainly helped by the fact that the fighting is a lot of fun. This is a hack and slash title, and you can certainly feel that in the combat. Your movement is very tightly controlled, and you have dodge abilities, light and heavy attacks, and sprint mechanics. You can match them together for small combos, and you'll be usually fighting a number of enemies at once. Now, this is a challenge because your camera movement is so tightly locked to one enemy at a time that you frequently cannot see another enemy if they're behind you. However, the voices in your head are narrating the battle and listening to their cries out for watch behind you or evade means you can actually fight very well and not be even looking at an enemy whilst you do it, which is seriously satisfying to pull off. And on that point, fighting in general is just satisfying. Hits feel violent and damaging, and of course taking damage feels like it too. It is difficult, it's not a breeze to tackle enemies, and putting the game's difficulty up to hard will pose a nice challenge for anyone wanting a really fun experience. Now, on this point of difficulty, there is one thing that will make you think twice about putting the difficulty up to hard, and that is the fact that you have this darkness inside of you, and every time you fail, i.e. every time you die, the darkness works its way further up towards your head, and once it does, the game is over. Permadeath. You have to restart from the beginning. Well, that is what the game says. In reality, it has come out that this actually isn't really a thing. No one seems to be able to trigger the game to kill you off and make you restart. It's impressive how it manages to play on your complete trust that it won't lie to you. But the massively important point of having this warning message at the start of the game is that regardless of the fact of whether permadeath exists or not, if you believe it does, then your concentration and connection to the game grows vividly. You pay far more attention to mistakes, to the world, actions, etc., as every mistake could take you closer to having to restart the entire game. And I really did feel this. I didn't find out that the permadeath was a hoax until after playing a lot, and it really did affect how I played. It's a clever little trick from Ninja Theory. So a few last things to point out. The game has a limited number of controls. You will hardly be using all the inputs on a controller, but that doesn't take away from it at all. The lack of a HUD makes the game so much better. It never prompts you with buttons to hit, but leaves you to work it all out yourself. And it means there's nothing to remove you from the world. It's amazing. I really wish more games built themselves around having no HUD, as it's both gorgeous and extremely immersive. On this point, the game is beautiful. Especially I've noticed the motion capture for Senua, whose character moves extremely fluidly and realistically. You'll venture through expansive landscapes with violent storms, fire and destruction, warm summer suns, etc. It's lovely. The game is both gorgeous and creepy, making you both stressed and relaxed at various points, and you can capture all of this in the game's built-in photo mode or NVIDIA Ansel. Personally, I'm all for more Ansel supported titles, as getting those extremely high resolution gorgeous shots is just too beautiful a thing to miss out on. But yeah, all in all, this is a brilliant game. You must give it a go. It's much cheaper than the usual game at £25 or about $30, which should make it accessible to more people. With a very solid 21x9 support across the board, I'm going to give it a WAF score of 4, and I can happily say this is totally worth your time and money. So I hope that gives you some information on how the game runs at 21x9. Give this video a like if you found it helpful, and subscribe for future info. For any other games at 21x9, head over to my channel or the WAF website. Hopefully I've covered it. If I haven't, then leave a comment down below and I'll try and cover it. And if you'd like to support the channel, the links to my Patreon page are in the description, and Amazon affiliate links are there too. See you later.
Get up. Get up and fight.
Nearly over. Finish it. They're overwhelming. Surrounding her. She's going to lose. Finish this! Finish him! Get up quickly! Get up! She's hurt. She's injured. She won't make it. She's injured. She can still do it. Behind you! Too slow. Fight again! Spill their blood! You finished it. What is she doing? Why is she doing this? Why doesn't she turn back? She's doing this for him. She wants to rescue him. He's already dead. But his soul is in Helheim. His soul still lives. She needs to save his soul. She wants his soul to be at peace. She needs to
The bridge to Helheim.
Where are we?
I forget its name.
Climb. She wants to climb up there. Look down. That's it. That's the way. Climb up there. Keep going, whatever you do, don't stop. You can't. This isn't right. You have to turn back. Get down.
What's she waiting for?
Why did she do that? She shouldn't have done it.
She can't go back now. No, this is it. The hidden path.
Get out of the way! Strong. Take him down! Take him down now!
Why suffer the past when there is a new road ahead? The only one that makes any sense.
Don't give up! Don't give up!